The most, we moved a lot as we were growing up, as most of my brothers and sisters can relate to. If I remember the numbers correctly, in the first 21 years Mom and Dad were married, they lived like 17 different places. And up until then, they'd never lived any place longer than 5 years. And that was including 2 stretches, or at least 1 stretch in Pleasant Grove. So, as in line with that moving, one of the fond memories that I have is the time that we spent in Tonga. And I was probably about 6, almost 7 by the time we moved, and lived there for 3 years. And it was a pretty good experience, and one that, you know, I still think back to a lot. And one of the things that I always remember though was, you know, for both Mom and Dad, family was their priority, and taking care of us. And so that was really memorable experience. And I just remember the times, whether we would be on a road trip going to Colorado, or whether we were in Indiana, driving out here to Utah. We did a lot of road trips and spent a lot of time together that way. And remember when we were in Tonga, a pretty common thing was Sunday afternoons. After we had Sunday dinner and stuff, we'd get in the car and go for a Sunday drive and go someplace sightseeing on the island, and just seeing what there was to see. Of course, it wasn't a very big island, but so it was really easy to get around. But I think in order to make the trips go longer, they set the speed limits at like really low. Like you could only go like 25 or 30 miles an hour was the fastest you could go anywhere on that island. So it made it seem like, you know, it was longer to get anywhere. But those are some of my memories. Some of our trips, some of our travels, and things like that we did together as a family.
Anybody else have anything to share? Diane, you're usually good at sharing. Tell us the story about.
Probably from being one of the older siblings in the family, I could regale you for hours, but most everybody knew that Dad was a music man. We all, as siblings, grew up in our family learning to play an instrument because Dad was a band teacher, choir leader, etc., singer. So probably a lot of my memories of Dad are connected to music, both in our lives as siblings and his life as a teacher, performer. And Mom was a homemaker. I thought I would tell of a lost art. When we moved to Pleasant Grove, Mom ironed shirts for the woman that was our piano teacher to pay for piano lessons. There were 3 sons and a husband in the family. And it was before the days of permanent press and dryers. The dryer was the clothesline back in the day. And so Mom would iron shirts every week for my piano teacher's family. And she decided that I should learn how to iron. And I don't know if Dad made it or if they just found it, but there was a little miniature ironing board about that long, about that wide. And they found a tiny miniature iron that would actually heat up in the hands of a child. And Mom, you'd launder the clothes, you'd hang them on the line, you'd get them dry, you would bring them in, and then you would sprinkle them with water to make them damp, and then you could iron the wrinkles out. So Dad used to carry handkerchiefs, and I was in charge of handkerchief ironing. So we'd lay the little handkerchief down on the little ironing board and press all the wrinkles out and get it just fine, while Mom was whipping through all of the shirts for her family, all of the shirts for the piano teacher's family. And she did that on a piece of equipment called an iron right. A big iron plate, a curved iron plate that went under a roller. and the iron plate is what would heat up. We operated it with your knees. You'd hit a lever and the roller would drop onto the plate, and another level would put the roller running, and it would pull the shirts. Mom could whip out shirts like you wouldn't believe on her iron rake, and I think Scott
has the iron rake.
inherited the iron rake. So I could tell you forever because I'm one of the old ones, so I've got lots and lots of memories. But Dad's music and Mom's playing her piano lessons with her iron rake stand out a little bit. So.
I don't know how many of the siblings ever tried this or remember, but the iron rake makes grilled cheese sandwiches. Kind of thin, but.
Clearly, you tried that.
Well, I probably have a lot of the same memories, of course, growing up, but one of the things that I remember most is Dad taught me how to play sports, and that's kind of, I don't know, that kind of left him in his later years. Because when we'd go out to play catch, every time I would throw something to Dad, it would nail him right in the head, right between the eyes. And it didn't matter if it was his keys, I just tossed them to him, or if it was a ball I was throwing or what, it always hit him in the head. So we kind of quit playing catch after a while.
That's why the only sport you should play.
But I was telling him the other night that one of the things that I remember down in the islands is, we were talking about going swimming and stuff. And, on the island where we stayed, it was surrounded by a coral reef, so you were protected from most of the nasty sea creatures and stuff, that could harm you. But there were still some on the inside of the reef. But low tide, we used to go out at one of the beaches and stand on the beach, and then on the reef, and then kind of look over the edge into the deep blue and see if you could see anything. I remember standing out there one day with Dad, and I don't know if it's a rogue wave or what, but when the tides change, they can change pretty quickly. And I remember standing out there on the reef with Dad, and all of a sudden this wave came in and broke over the top of us. And I wasn't tall enough to still stay standing on the reef as the water starts going out. I remember hanging on to Dad, hoping that he had footing because I wasn't going over the edge. But I kind of stayed away from the reef after that, stayed in where it was a little bit safer. Yeah. Mom used to, my favorite activity with Mom was, on Sundays we used to sit on the couch and watch the golf tournaments. Mom never played golf, but she enjoyed watching golf.
Those of us that are older remember Sunday afternoons with the Scrabble board. We scrabbled every Sunday at the kitchen table. Those of us that were the oldest sisters. Pre-TV.
Pre-TV days.
Well, couple of things that I was able to recall was at one point after Dad had retired, they were working in the Chicago Temple, but they were only up there 2 weeks out of every month, and so we were sharing. I can't remember if that's when they were living with us or we were living with them, but they were living with us at that time. So they would live with us for 2 weeks and then be up at the temple for 2 weeks. And I remember that was about the time that Rochelle was wee little, and she was a little bit of a colicky baby and hard to get down to sleep at night. And Paul and I would try everything we had up our sleeve to get her to calm enough to go to sleep at night, and many days to no avail. But all we had to do was say, "Here, Grandpa," and Grandpa would always take her in his arms and he would pat her, and in moments she was asleep. He just had that magic touch, and with any of our kids, he always could put those babies to sleep when we were, as parents, were at our wits' end. He had that magic touch. So he was the baby whisperer. Yeah, made me think of that when Lonnie was talking about that the other night. And I remember with Grandma Dorothy, when I was a young woman, I was probably maybe my maid age, and this is when we all lived together in Indiana. We were I was in the same ward as Paul's family, and I don't know if they do this all throughout the church, the Golden Green Ball with the floor shows? Okay, well, this was about the time, it was a few months leading up to the Golden Green Ball dance, and our stake always held that and had as an intermission a big floor show, a big dance type thing. And I can remember that Grandma would come in because she and Grandpa loved to dance and were quite good as dance instructors. They asked her to come in and teach us this one dance, and I got to be one of the dancers in the crew that was dancing, and she taught us how to do the Charleston. And that was just a rush for me because I always loved, whenever I'd watch old movies, seeing the dancers do the Charleston. So it was a lot of fun. She taught us how to do that, and then we were able to perform it at the Golden Green Ball dance show. So that was a lot of fun. She quite often would be called in to teach us dances for the Golden Green Ball dance things, but that's the one I remember specifically because I got to do that one.
I actually don't remember much, so probably we have a lot of stories to tell.
Well, I remember after Grandpa had retired, he liked to do the latch hook rugs, and for those of you that don't know what those are, you have like a net looking thing, and then you have these little cut pieces of yarn that you thread through and it ties in a knot. And then when it's all done, it's usually like some kind of picture, and it's a rug or a wall hanging or that kind of thing. I think they have a picture over there. Well, I remember whenever we would go and visit, I was Grandpa's assistant, and I would sit and hand him the pieces of yarn as he would sit at the loom just doing the little the latch hook rugs, and I was lucky enough that I got to get one of those when they passed away, but because I have that memory of spending time with him. But one of the memories, and I'll go ahead and tell it, even though Mom doesn't want to. Yes.
Well, it's funny because when I asked my son Sean, who was not able to make it, what's your favorite memory of Grandma? This was the story he told.
So, yeah, because we lived far away, we didn't get to spend a lot of time with Grandma and Grandpa and all the cousins, because you guys were all up here in Utah and we were everywhere else. But we would always get to come up for the summers, and the last time after Grandpa had passed away and just before Grandma had passed, it was the last time that we got to come and visit. And we spent some time with them, and I think most of the time Grandma just kind of sat in her rocking chair and that kind of thing, but as we were getting ready to go, she was eating a snack of Cheetos, or they were cheese balls, the big cheese balls. And so we were getting ready to go, and we all got loaded in the car, and she's like, well, I'll come out and wave goodbye. And so she came to the door. As we were pulling away, she's waving and smiling. And my dad says, oh, it looks like Grandma's been eating Cheetos. And she had a big cheesy smile, and she was all in her teeth. And so that's a funny story that we always remember about Grandma.
See, I remember it a little bit differently. I remember that we would always come over and eat all of her cheese balls, and it would make her angry. And so one summer she hid them, and we weren't allowed to have them, and we had already left, but we forgot something, so we came back. And she thought we were gone for good, and that's when she's like, oh, bye, and had cheese balls.
Do you have some?
I got a story. Okay, I'll come over here so I'm not so like close up on everything. Put the camera. I guess. No, I don't know. It's not really necessarily a funny story, but and Michelle says that I met Grandma and Grandpa before this, but I don't remember. I might have come over to pick up something from Diane's house when they were visiting, but we kind of got introduced like through the School of Hard Knocks. A week before my wedding to Michelle, I was racing a friend in my Mustang and I blew the engine. So when we got married in San Antonio, we didn't have a car. And Winslow and Dorthy came down to be at the wedding with us, and they ended up hitching a U-Haul to the back of their car. And we spent our honeymoon driving from Texas back to Utah with them. So it was a convo way for me to get to know them and them to get to know me really well, because we shared hotels, we shared their car, we shared everything. all the way over here to Utah, and then they helped us move into our first apartment. And then over the years, it didn't take very long. They accepted me right into their house, and as part of one of the members of the family, made me feel really special and wanted here, which was something I didn't really expect. And I didn't know what to expect, but it was good. There was a funny story though. One day I was hiking with my kids through the forest in our back of our house when we moved to American Fork. We were hiking through this forest, and right next to the forest there's a golf course. And there's one part of the golf course that you can see from this forest trail that we were on. And I look over there, and who's on that tee? But Grandpa, John, and was it Scott or Paul? Probably Scott. Okay. Those three were out there hitting right off of that tee right as we were walking by. So we went out and we talked to them for a little bit. It's really cool. Probably, I don't know, what are the coincidences, just not very, they were at that golf course quite a lot, because that was where Grandpa worked, right? Yep. And I was always hiking in that forest, so I guess it was bound to happen. But anyway, that's the two stories that I have.
That reminded me that I think when you think about Dad, he had maybe 3 career things in his life. The first early years of his life were school teaching, band and music, and etc. And when he gave that up and started working for North American Van Line, he started by driving from side to side of the United States. Dad loved to travel. And then, being in Fort Wayne training. And then retiring and working at the golf course. He had those 3 big major career things in his life. So depending on what your memories are, some of the older grandchildren, I think, can probably remember traveling with Grandpa in the cab of one of his North American Van Lines and bumping across the road.
Well, I got a couple more memories I'll throw out since you brought up about the truck. After we had moved to Fort Wayne and he was working in their training department, on occasion he would still go out on road trips, but most of the road trips he would go on were just a day trip. So he'd go out, pick up something, or drop a trailer off, pick up a trailer, and then come back. And I remember this one time in particular, we'd gone up to the Chicago area to drop off and pick up a load. And if I remember right, I think all we did was we went up there and just switched trailers and then came back. But as we were coming back, we get just about past Valparaiso, Indiana, and back onto US Highway 30, which was the highway that led right back over to Fort Wayne. And we're sitting there in the truck, and all of a sudden Dad pulls over to the side of the road. And he's like, "I'm tired. I can't drive anymore." He said, and I had my driver's license by then, but I'd never drove a semi. And but I did drive the Volkswagen Beetle that had a stick shift in it and stuff, so I knew how to shift gears and stuff. He pulls over to the side of the road. He says, "I am tired. I can't drive anymore. It's your turn." So I got in. He's like, "Okay, just a quick lesson on here's how the gears work in the truck, a little different than they work in a car and stuff, and just keep it between the lines." He says, "And if anywhere along the way you get pulled over," he says, "as long as you keep it the speed limit, you shouldn't, but if any reason the cops decide to pull you over, just make sure you wake me up so I can get back into the cab before we get there." And he says, other than that, he says there was a rest area right before we got back to where the North American Van Line's headquarters were. He says, otherwise, he says, when you get to that rest stop, pull in there and we'll switch and I'll take it into the plant. So that was my experience with driving a semi. That was pretty exciting. I didn't know that he did that with you. I mean, he did the same thing with me. We went to Iowa once to pick up a load of washers and dryers. And we had driven there and picked up the load and we're on the way back, and we weren't far out of, I think it was out of Des Moines. We weren't very far out of Des Moines. And he did the same thing. He pulled over and says, "I can't drive anymore. You want to drive?" Of course, you know, I didn't have my chauffeur, Class C license or anything, I just had a regular driver's license, but he put me in and kind of gave me the same instructions, you know, if you get pulled over. Well, I was staying with the speed limit, and I was driving along, and pretty soon, this little black Mustang just came up and blew around me and cut right in front of me and off of an exit. Right behind him was a policeman. And of course, the policeman couldn't get off the exit because I was now blocking the exit, and so he pulled back and kind of just stayed behind me, and I'm thinking, oh no. You know, I woke Dad up, and you know, of course, he never did pull me over. He just kind of, you know, followed me for a while because I think he's trying to figure out where the Mustang went. But yeah, I drove about the rest of the way back to Fort Wayne, and then pulled over just before we got into town, and he took over again. But I thought I was the only one that did that.
I think you and I were the only ones. I don't think he ever did that with Scott.
The other neat thing was that Tina mentioned they were working up in the Chicago temple, and it was kind of neat for us to be able to go up to the temple, and Dad was the officiator in the session and stuff. So we got to go through the temple with Dad officiating and things.
Kind of the other thought was related to golf. When we were living out here and he was working at the golf course and stuff, there were a lot of times that I'd be getting off work and I'd call him up and I'd say, hey Dad, I'm going to go play golf. You want to come join me? And Dad would always ask me, well, do you want me to come join you? And so finally I said to Dad, I says, okay Dad, you're allowed one stupid question a day. And that's your stupid question, because if I didn't want you to come, I wouldn't call you and ask you. And stuff. So, but even after that, from then on, it was like I'd call him and he'd say, well, do you want me to come join you? Okay, Dad, there's your stupid question for the day. Okay, I'll meet you at the golf course.
Dad wasn't a real strong golfer. I mean, he taught us all how to play. And I learned when we were down in the Tongan Islands, you know, when we first moved down there, they had one golf course, and it was in the middle of the capital, Nuku'alofa, and shortly after we were down there, the queen died. Well, they buried her in the middle of the golf course. That was the royal burial grounds, and they buried her there, and they closed the golf course, and of course they shut down all activities for 6 months? For a year, you know, for proper mourning period. So there weren't enough people down there that liked to play golf that on the school campus, on the Leahona campus, they built a little 9-hole course that went around the perimeter. No, I thought it was 9. I thought it was only 6. Anyway, they built a little golf course around the perimeter of the rugby field and the school grounds and stuff. And that's where I learned to play golf. But Dad was a definite fan of the mulligan, which is a do-over. And we kind of used to laugh because Dad's golf swing, he wasn't real good. You know, of course, Dad was kind of tall and played with a regular set of clubs, so his swing was kind of like this. He would always stand up, and so he quite often topped the ball. Well, it kind of became second nature that Dad's swing was actually turning to this. Then his hand was in his pocket to pull out another ball before he even got done with the swing.
I think it was in Tonga that Dad learned to play golf.
Yeah.
And it was in Tonga that he had an accident playing golf. He took a swing and the ball went into a small retaining wall.
Actually, it was a curve along the side road that was only this high. It was amazing you could even hit it.
Little tiny curve. And the ball hit the curve and came back and flew in and hit his eye. And I was in Hawaii going to school at the time, and they sent him to Oahu to an eye specialist to see what could be done. And basically they told him that his eyes stayed dilated. It wouldn't contract and open and close with the light. It just stayed dilated. And they told him if there was going to be any change, then the eye would have to do it itself. There wasn't any surgery or anything they could do for him, so the eye would have to heal itself. And it never quite did, so I don't know if people remember Grandpa having one dilated eye, and the other one, that's because of that golf accident.
Actually, it did finally heal.
Did it?
About the time he had started to develop cataracts, but it had actually healed. And when it healed, they actually said, you would not need glasses now that it's healed, except that when he did that and they gave him glasses, they put a prescription in the lens on the good eye. And so now that good eye had become dependent on that prescription. And so as a result of that, he still had to wear glasses, but now he didn't have to have a prescription in that eye.
Yeah, I was with Dad when that happened. And, you know, we were down in the islands, and we had a little Yamaha 55cc motorcycle. And I thought that was gonna be my first opportunity to get to drive it, because when Dad got hit, he says, "Well, take the motorcycle and go get help." And he saw me head over to the motorcycle, must have had second thoughts. He said, "No, I'll do it. You carry the bag home." So I got to carry the golf clubs home.
Oh, mercy.
I don't have a lot of memories of Grandma and Grandpa either, but one thing that I always remember is when we went to Grandma and Grandpa's house, they always had the best bread. And we would always go in the backyard and pick fresh pears from the tree, and we would pick raspberries off the bush. And so now, every time I eat fresh raspberries, it reminds me of Grandma and Grandpa's house.
They're just getting right. They're quite unpredictable, but they're just getting right.
I don't know where Michelle went, but that was one of the things that she was telling me, was she always remembered picking raspberries, and Grandma would send the kids all out with a bowl to pick berries, and, you know, when they thought they were done, they'd come in, and she's like, "What? I knew there were more berries than that on the bush. What happened?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know," but reality was they probably ate twice as many as made it in the bowl that would come back in for jams. That was one of hers. She shared. I remember Grandpa was a great handyman, and every time he would come to visit, he'd kind of dawdle around, you know, for about a day or half a day, trying to figure out what to do with himself, and finally he'd say, "You have anything you need me to work on? Do you need me to fix anything?" And so I usually could come up with a project. So from that point on, I would always, if I knew Grandpa was planning a visit, I would start my honey-do list and have it on the refrigerator. So when he came, he knew what he could occupy himself with when we weren't busy doing things. And he always completed pretty much everything on my honey-do list that needed repair. So I always loved that.
That's why I'm not good at doing honeydews, is because I always left them for Grandpa.
Why do it? Maybe he's gonna come to him.
Back at it. That's the dank
Dad
means.
was a have toolbox will travel, because I was the military wife that moved around every place, and they came to see me in almost every place that we ever lived, except Fairbanks, Alaska, when I first got married. And he came every place we lived, and Dad kept us in good working order. I never found anything Dad couldn't fix. He brought that toolbox with him. He always took working vacations when he came to see us.
Well, Grandpa was an excellent carpenter too, and that was one of the things. I always knew he had a love of music. He was our ward choir director and loved music and sacrament meeting and everything in our home ward as I was growing up. But after I was married, he came and did a little project, and that's where I learned that he was quite the carpenter. Excuse me, man. Anyway, and my mother was just an avid reader, and she had books coming out her ears, you know. We had so many little tiny bookcases everywhere in our house. And the house I grew up in, as you came in the front door, there was a little stair that went to the upstairs, and then you had the living room. Well, she never put anything on the one wall there, and when she learned that my father-in-law was a carpenter, she says, "Oh, you've got to talk to him and see if he'll come build me some bookcases." So I talked with Dad, and he said, "Sure, no problem." So he came in and he built this floor-to-ceiling, wall-to-stairwell bookcase, and it still wasn't enough for all my mother's books, but she filled it up really fast, but they were beautiful. He had done some excellent work on it.
Shake the table again. I'm gonna tie you to a wheelchair and push it down Mary for a head.
Did carpentry work too.
Remember that.
We worked for
We get broken furniture to the DI, and they used to repair it and then put it out for people. And Dad's dad worked at the DI until he was 96, doing carpentry and repairing furniture.
That part before he passed away, because I thought he worked up until like 6 months before he passed away. He had just turned 98.
Yeah, he died when he was
Yeah.
98.
So it was probably when he was 97. But yeah, that was amazing to me about that. How he just kept going and going, and how late he kept working throughout his life.
And don't you wonder how he never cut off a plant here? He was back in my grandfather's day, you could get a lifetime driver's license. And my grandfather got a lifetime driver's license. He got to the place where he had no peripheral vision. He had tunnel vision. And he would get in his car and be in the right lane and drive from Orem 1600 North down to the Provo DI in the right lane with tunnel vision.
Piss me off.
He drove himself back and forth from Provo to North Orem all the time he was working there. You can't get away with lifetime license anymore, driving with tunnel vision, so.
Does anybody have any stories they'd like to share about the original siblings? Grandchildren living with? Oh, come on, Shirley.
I'm one of the siblings.
She's one of the original siblings.
Who always
Ellen. Oh, yes, of course. What was it? The rat boys.
Oh, that's an old one.
I know, some of these kids haven't never heard it.
I can't remember the exact circumstances that led up to it, but for some reason, when we were living, I think it was a Hurricane.
Could have been.
We were living in Hurricane, and Mom and Dad had to go someplace. They left Julie and me, and I'm not sure who else was with us, there in the home, you know, because they were just going to be gone shortly. Well, when they came back, they found Julie and I sitting there, and she had a box. We had found a box of rat poison, and she had a spoon, and of course there was residue of this rat poison around mine and her mouth, and so they didn't know had we eaten any or not. So we got to have the experience going to the hospital and have our stomachs pumped and everything. But I always blame my sister for trying to poison me. So I later got even with her. I don't know if you remember the little garden trowels that on one side has like a hoe, and you turn it over on the other side it has like 3 prongs. I whacked her in the knee with the 3 prongs just to get even with her. So.
And we were a pretty peaceful family, all things considered, with 6 siblings, but probably all of us have at least one, whoops, things got a little violent that time, this story.
Young kids, now's the time to tell all your parents.
Well, he's not here to defend himself, but Alan and I had one exchange. We got along pretty well. He and I were always pretty good friends, and with all the moving that we did, we got to be pretty good friends, because you always knew your brother and your sister when you moved to a new town. But this was happened in Pleasant Grove, and we had a day when Mom and Dad had gone out, and Alan's older than I am by a couple of years, but I always seemed to get put in charge of the babysitting. So I was being a very efficient babysitter and giving direction, and I think I had instructed Paul to do something, and out of nowhere Alan told him he didn't have to do that. Well, I took offense. I'm in charge. But he was in charge. So we kind of had an exchange that ended with me running into the bathroom and locking the door and boo-hooing, and Alan calming down outside the locked bathroom door. Pretty soon you heard, "I won't tell if you don't tell."
XD.
So we never told Mom and Dad. It was years and years and years. We all had kids and grandkids before we ever told that story in their hearing again. So we were a pretty peaceful family, but we all have one exchange that was not of the peace-loving kind.
Well, I don't remember too much that when we were younger that Paul and I didn't get along very well, but the way Mom told the story, we were always at each other. And years after we had moved to Indiana, she goes, I don't remember where we were at, but Mom and I were driving in the car somewhere, and just kind of out of the blue, she goes, you know, as much as the family didn't like moving to Indiana, she goes, I'm really glad we moved to Indiana for one reason. She goes, because you and Paul are now friends. And she goes, up until then, she says, I didn't think that the two of you would ever be really close and really good friends. But when we moved to Indiana, like Diane said, you kind of got there and kind of all we had was each other. And we started, you know, palling around together and going to movies and going to play golf and doing various things. And I think that was the point in our lives where I know from my perspective that I think Paul and I got to be closer than we ever had before. I remember lots of family gatherings where, especially at Christmas time, you know, where Diane or Julie would be sitting at the piano and we'd be singing whatever and stuff. And I think that's part of where I developed my love for singing was through all of those experiences. And I remember after I moved back out here, and right before Mom and Dad had retired and moved back out here, the lady that lived right across the street here was the choir director at the time in the ward here. And we were doing something and she was wanting to run through the tenor part. And so we were running through the tenor part and we got done and she was just kind of silent for a moment. And she goes, I could have sworn, John, that your dad was just sitting right there. She goes, because your voice sounds exactly like his. So. And now I look in the mirror and wonder why Dad's looking back at me every morning.
That was interesting that, I don't know if Dad planned it that way or not. Scott, John, and myself, Alan refused to sing, so he wouldn't sing. The three of us, he taught us all to sing, but he taught us all different parts.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we used to sing together in quartets and things, you know, but it was kind of frustrating sometimes that Dad would volunteer us to things without asking us if we want to do it. And next thing you knew, we were committed to sing a number in state conference or church or something, you know, that, oh, wow.
I think that was his own experience.
Yeah, I sang in the mission for
His dad and some of Dad's brothers, and so brothers and Dad and two of his brothers, same experience. Grandpa would accept invitations for them all to sing at different occasions.
I didn't mind most of the occasions that he volunteered us for, but the ones that I always had the hardest time with that he volunteered us for was to sing at people's funerals. You know, those were tough. But, especially when it was somebody that we were related to. So, but good memories with all those times singing together.
I hate to cut us a little bit short, but you told me that there was going to be another meal holding experience. No, we need to put them all away.
Yeah, we need to put the tables and chairs. The chairs can go against the walls. The tables will, if you go straight through the kitchen, there's a room in there and the tables go in there. And then he said there's vacuums in there. He also wants to make sure that we vacuum.
All right, since anybody else has a memory they'd like to share, we'll go ahead and close things. If everybody will just pitch in and put up some chairs and tables so we can get things cleaned up and be on our way. Lunch will be at Provo Canyon. Everyone should have received the directions in the last email that came out. It's at Nuns Park. We're in the small pavilion. I can't remember if it was the north or south side. Anyway, it's the small pavilion at Nuns Park up in Provo Canyon. So you should know the directions on that. And we have that area from 12 until 4. I think Chantel's planning on serving lunch by 1 o'clock. So we'll try to get there by 1 o'clock at the latest. If you want to make a beeline there to help her get set up, I'm sure she'd appreciate any extra hands.
And if you want to run around the church 5 or 6 times so you can get hungry again.
Just do it on the outside.
Dad, I got a question.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Waterloos!